Hello, I'm Seb Coe and I'm chairman of CSM, and over the next few weeks I've enticed a few friends from the world of sport to share their extraordinary tales from their careers with me and of course with you. They all come from a bandwidth of background in the sporting ecosystem. They're competitors, coaches, performance directors, those who have brought brands to partner with sport, and those that have thought out of the box and created something that has changed the face of their sport, maybe others. COVID-19 has rocked sport to its core and posed a generational threat to stakeholders across the industry. How will it bounce back? Throughout this series, I will be asking them about their own personal odysseys in sport and also how this pandemic has affected them and their organisations and the lessons we can absorb from it, as well as ready ourselves for the new normal we are all soon to face. The first of my guests is the founder of one of the world's fastest growing sports. In just 9 years, Formula E has gone from an idea scribbled on a restaurant napkin to a truly global sport, attracting major automotive manufacturers, world-class drivers, and sponsorship from leading brands. The sixth season of Formula E was billed with justification as the biggest yet for the all-electric racing series, with new manufacturers, Mercedes-Benz and Porsche, competing a full grid of 24 cars, competing in 13 races staged in some of the world's most iconic cities. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by a former politician. We first met in that arena in 1998. He's an entrepreneur to his fingertips and an electric vehicle pioneer. He's also a good friend. He is Alejandro Agag. Alejandro, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Seb. And that is actually true. 1998, when we were both in politics. I'm not the only ex-politician here. And it's great to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
When did you actually leave politics?
I left politics in 2002. Early 2002. Yeah, so I stayed for a little bit more. When I met you, I think I was about to get elected in the European Parliament. Then I went to serve as an MEP, and then I stopped a few years later.
Yeah, I was the private secretary to the leader of the opposition.
Exactly.
William Hague at the time.
William Hague.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's how we met.
So let's park politics for a moment, which is probably a very, very good thing to do. I mentioned in my introduction, Alejandro, that the genesis of Formula E was actually scribbled on the back of a napkin. Is that true? And if it is, do you have the napkin framed somewhere in your office?
Well, actually, that is true. That is true. And I will tell you later where the napkin is. But the story goes that Jean Todt had just recently been elected president of the FIA, of the Federation of Motorsport. And he said, listen, I would like to meet Antonio Tajani. Antonio Tajani was at the time Commissioner of Transport, of Energy and Transport in the European Commission, and he had the whole motor industry in his portfolio. And Antonio and I had been colleagues sitting next to each other in the European Parliament. So I suggested Jean that I could organize a dinner in Paris for the three of us, just a friends dinner to just talk about the motor industry and the trends and where this is going and so on. So we did that, and Antonio came to Paris, and we went to this little restaurant called Stresa in Paris, behind the Place Athénée. Is Jean Todt's favorite, one of my favorites too. It's a very small restaurant, Italian restaurant. And then we are in this table around in a little corner behind where the coats are. And we start talking, and Antonio Tajani is going on about electric cars and the future of the industry, and that the industry has to be more clean, and that the future is going to be electric. And Jean says, well, actually FIA should create something electric, a championship or something. And I remember said, yeah, I would really like to be the promoter of that, because I think that is the future. And at the time I was making some notes in this piece of paper, and actually that's the famous napkin. It wasn't a napkin, actually. It was like a crumbled piece of paper. And
not even as grand as a napkin.
Not even as grand as a napkin. Well, because also the napkins in that place are made of fabric. So it would have been difficult to write on them. But I had this kind of small paper on my pocket, my jacket, that I started writing on. That piece of paper, the famous napkin, it's now framed on top of that table. So if you have dinner in that restaurant in Paris, the owners of the restaurants have the napkin, which is now signed by Jean Todt, by Antonio, by myself, saying Formula E was born on this table.
I think that restaurant is a very popular haunt of one Richard Mille, who I know you know extremely well. So the next time I have supper with him in there, I'm going to dig out that napkin or that crumpled piece of paper and take a photograph of it. I'm interested. Clearly, was this the first time that you had thought or been provoked into thinking about electric? Or was there something in your background, maybe from politics, that had made you realize that actually this may be something that was just a natural follow on from what we had rather taken as petrol sport?
Yeah, it was not the first time it came to my mind. No, that is true. I already had been thinking about it. I mean, in my time in politics, electric cars were not on the table at all, but the environment was starting to be an important issue. And of course, there were green parties around Europe that were more worried about nuclear energy or things like that. But the climate change was still not a common term used by everyone. No? But I was one of the youngest. I was the youngest, I think at the time, member of European Parliament, at least from my country. And that was definitely one of my priorities. And I was making questions to the European Commission about it. I was active on the environmental side. But then really when I thought about it was, before Formula E, many years before, I was for many years involved in, let's call it, normal motorsport or combustion motorsport.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was doing was to bring sponsors into Formula One. So I remember we were negotiating with a sponsor, this must have been around 2006 or 2007, to take a big sponsorship of one of the races in Formula One. And we were almost there. And suddenly the CEO of the company calls me and says, listen, we're not going to do it. I say, why not? I was disappointed. And he said, listen, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to do better than that. I'm going to sell you the trail of emails of all my team and their comments. And then you're going to understand. So he did send me that trail of emails. And in every email, there was an argument against associating with combustion, against associating with pollution, against associating with anything that harms the environment. Bottom line, against associating with Formula One. So in that moment, I thought, we have a problem. Because it was my environment, it was my job. And I thought, if we could find some kind of green Formula One, and I remember I asked around about electric cars, and I remember I conversation with Bruno Michel, the CEO of GP2, and he said, listen, there is one prototype somewhere, but the problem is it only goes for like 10 minutes. And I thought, oh, that's not enough. But that was the first time it came to my mind. So since then, it was kind of in the back of my head, like a worry about the unsuitability of the whole model for the future, because I thought, or I knew that environment was only going to get a bigger issue.
But I well remember the huge skepticism expressed by everybody at the time. Well, not everybody, but most notably Bernie Ecclestone, who actually said he didn't think you'd make it to the first race. I guess the competitor in me tells me that you fed off that cynicism and probably were even more determined to get it across the line.
Well, let me say it was a big motivation. Yes, it was a big motivation. Yes, because a lot of my friends, basically all my friends that were in motorsport, didn't think I was going to, not even going to make it. They thought I was going to crash spectacularally. I remember Bernie telling me, you will never get to your first race. I remember Flavio Briatore, who was, and he's a very close friend, same as Bernie, making jokes with me, like if it was electric, like electric discharges, every time he came back close to me, he would make like a noise of electricity, like, like things like that. So everybody was really taking it a bit as a joke. And that was the main challenge, really, is to make people believe that this thing was going to survive, because there was such a consensus that this thing was gonna collapse, that very few people wanted to associate with it, because they thought, okay, why am I going to sponsor, or why am I going to have a team in a project that in 6 months or 1 year will crash? So that was our big challenge in the beginning. But like you said, it was also a big motivation, and and kept us going. And we had the same way that we had many cynicals. We also had, suddenly out of the woods came incredible supporters. So we had some really great sponsors who came right at the start, like DHL or Tag Heuer or Michelin or Julius Baer, the bank, or others. Suddenly we had these people who said, even if you crash, we want to be involved in this because we think it's worth it.
Alejandro, let me just dwell, if I may, for a few moments on the cynicism element in all this, because yes, you won them over, and yes, you gained converts along the way, but I'm guessing the human condition is often to have second thoughts, because the weight of opinion is so often expressed against an idea. Did you ever have any second thoughts, even when good friends of yours whose judgment you trusted were saying that you wouldn't make it? Because, for those listening to this podcast who are running businesses or trying to do things that, are bucking the status quo, that's always a huge challenge.
Of course, I never had second thoughts on the will of going forward and of continuing. So I never had a thought of giving up. Of course, I had really bad days where I thought, oh my God, we're not going to make it. And my drive came from almost kind of a moral obligation to not let down the people that had believed in the project. So I had to make it because so many people had invested money, had, creating a team to race in the championship. So many sponsors had already embarked and paid money. So many people believed in the project that I was kind of the screw in the center of it all. If I cracked, the whole thing would have gone, so I basically had to make it for the others, not for myself, but for everyone else that really had believed. So that was kind of a big feeling of responsibility. It became, at some point, I remember, I would wake up every morning at 3 a.m. No need for alarm clock. Every morning I would open my eyes at 3 a.m. sharp, at 3, not at 2:59, not at 3:01, at 3. I don't know how. And I would just see invoices. I open the eyes and I see invoices. And I would think of all these invoices and I think, I'm going to pay that one, I'm going to tell that one to wait, to that one I'm not going to return the call, to that one I'm going to tell him to talk to my sister. I don't know, it was kind of a whole, because at one point we owed 25 million to our suppliers and we had $100,000 in the bank. So it was pretty tough.
This is not classic Harvard Business School, Alejandro, but I'm very pleased.
Not really, no.
Very pleased to hear the practical advice you're giving here. But look, to the doubters, of course, you then had to deal with the initial failure around some of the battery technology. And I guess that was also another challenge, just to keep not the doubters on board, but the teams that had actually signed up to this, all moving in the right direction.
Well, yeah. And there is a little bit of an untold story, because at the time I didn't tell anyone really, but we had a battery supply. So the most difficult thing in any electric car, and now of course the technology has advanced a lot, but in 2011, 2012, it was still very early days, is the battery technology. But on the other hand, without a battery, you have no electric car. So the battery was the heart of the whole project. So we managed to get an agreement with a big car manufacturer to make us the batteries. We gave them the specs, we start the project, and then in the meantime, we start signing up teams, we start signing up sponsors, we start signing up cities, we start going forward with everything because we knew we had a battery. And about under 1 year before the first race, we get a call from that manufacturer saying, I'm so sorry, but we are abandoning the battery project because we cannot make it work. So the whole thing, the whole house of cards, the central card is taken away. And the whole thing is completely shaky. So we had to react super quick. And we did that in two ways. First, we found another battery supplier. And that was Williams. And Williams,
How long did it take you to find that?
Like 48 hours. So we were, because we had been talking to them already, they were kind of, already we were there. Yeah. But because we hadn't push the button in time, Williams said, sorry, we cannot produce the batteries on time. Second thing we did was then I kind of found a way to present it on the right way. We were going to start in May, but then I said, I changed my mind. I'm going to start the championship in September so I don't clash too much with Formula One. That was one of the reasons. The other reason was I gained the 3 or 4 months that Williams needed to supply the batteries. So it was a really close call, but we made it. And and at the end, I actually have to say that battery, even that we got a very good battery, could not finish the whole race. With that battery, we could only do half of the race. So then we had to decide to do the races with 2 cars. So the driver would start the race with 1 car, jump out in the pit stop to the second car, and then continue. But it worked.
A little bit of orthodox Harvard Business School now, if you don't mind me.
Sure.
Probing. Look, I've long since believed that the difference between the good and the great in sport, actually probably other walks of life for that matter, is how you bounce back and regroup after setbacks. I'm really interested in how you keep your teams driving forward when you do have those setbacks, because there is always a natural instinct in some parts of the team to look for the life belts when the boat hits choppy water. What advice would you give to somebody that is experiencing exactly those challenges, less so in the technical solutions, but more so in how you keep your teams focused and with their eye on the main prize?
Well, it's. I think everyone has a different way of managing a team. It's not like one single probably mechanism. Some people, do it differently than others. The way we do it in Formula E is really there are 2 things that we apply in Formula E, or I apply maybe if because I guess I'm the leader of the team. But first, I delegate a lot, like exaggerated level of delegation. So each one has a very, very big space of responsibility. So they know what's going on. So you need people to know what's going on to be committed to the project and to still keep the vision on the final prize. Because if you keep them in the uncertainty, if you keep the information not flowing, they don't know what's going on. Trust goes both ways, and then they start not trusting you, and then they don't know what's going on, and then they start looking for a lifesaver boat or something, or to do something. Second is at least what we do here, credit gets very distributed. So if someone does something good, credit is his, and that I think is important for the team, because if the boss takes the credit all the time, I take enough credit already, because if a ball stays there bouncing and it's nobody's, it's mine. But you have to allocate credit where it really is deserved, and I think people really appreciate that. So if you delegate enough, and if you give credit enough to the people when they do something well, I think people stay motivated. I have been really lucky because I had a core team of people, super loyal, that has been all the way through the bad times and through the good times and so on, and the team has grown, but with the same spirit. So it's been very lucky, really.
So Alejandro, what I'm really drawing from that is just a simple proposition: be uncompromising about the quality of the people that you employ. They have to be world class. They have to be best in field. Trust them to get on with the job, and don't micromanage them.
Absolutely. This is the key. Because if you micromanage them, why do you have them? First of all, you need to try to get people that are better than you, at least better than you on each specialty. Because I'm not a good lawyer. I know some law and I can read a contract, but my lawyer should be 10 times better lawyer than I am. I know finance a little bit, but my finance guy needs to be 10 times better. My sponsorship guy should be 10 times better. Maybe I do some things better than others, but in general, you should surround yourself with people that are better than you, and you are in the middle, and your job is really to get the most of those people. But if you micromanage them, you are effectively blocking those people from delivering their best.
So finding people that are smarter than you is probably the best risk mitigator.
Oh yeah, oh for sure, for sure. If you find people that are more stupid than you, it's a problem.
Yes, you don't go out and knowingly recruit them in that order. Alejandro, let me just fast forward, if I may, to 2014. You've successfully navigated the championship to your first race in Beijing. Just how difficult was the first year?
I mean, if I tell you the first race in Beijing, that was, I still today don't know how that race happened. It was a miracle. I moved to Beijing for a month, almost a month. So I got a room in a hotel and I just set myself there. And I was going myself at 2 a.m. to the track. And I was there with the workers, offloading the fences, the walls with my Chinese partner. There was a bridge to go into the paddock that was going over the track. The bridge was shaking every time one person crossed it. I mean, the whole thing. I don't know how it worked. It did work, but it was so difficult. And then there was no real organization, so we were running from one race to the next. So we finished China. Everyone would take a plane and go to Malaysia, and just start trying to solve problems in Malaysia. And then it would finish, and we would jump to Punta del Este in Uruguay and start to try to solve the race there and produce it. So it was all living on the day and trying to solve each problem. And then at the same time, a small team in London trying to put a structure for the year, for next year, to try to do things better.
I've heard a variation of that because, of course, my youngest son was working in your hospitality.
Yes, he was.
He was the one on the planes and running the pit lanes. Let's focus on the future a little bit, because clearly COVID-19 has been a massive, massive setback for wherever you sit globally, and it doesn't really matter what organization you're in. Very, very few people have come out of this unscathed by it. And of course, all the economic predictors are telling us that we're going to hit a recession. Some countries have already got into that, and the analysts are telling us it's going to bite deep. Based on your experience of dealing with tough times, and you've just identified enough for most people to deal with in a lifetime, what would your advice be to today's business leaders in navigating the water that we've sort of landed ourselves in?
Well, I think the first, I mean, without trying to give an advice, but the first thing really actually is probably to keep calm.
Well, maybe not advice, just instinct.
But to keep calm, because, we have to keep the head cool. For sure it's going to be tough. But on the other hand, there is not a structural reason for the recession. It's a unexpected, out of the blue hit, huge hit. We didn't see it coming at all, and it has just have a huge effect. Has paralyzed effectively the economy of the world for 3 months, which is huge in terms of production, GDP, etc. But there is no real structural reason for it. Second is we have to see how long it lasts, and effectively we are seeing good signs in the last days, definitely. Third, we have to keep being optimistic. So it will be tough. There will be industries that will completely transform. People have to be really open to make big changes. We have to use this as an opportunity, and it sounds like a cliche, but it's not. We have to use it as an opportunity to reduce cost. In Formula E, we were trying to make the teams understand they should spend less. Now they all understand. So, now we're cutting costs. We're putting things where we wanted them to be, but we couldn't. Now, sometimes we can't put them where we want to be now using this situation. So, of course, it's terrible what's happening, but not everything has to be necessarily bad. You can get some good lessons from this, and it sounds like a cliche and so on, but I really believe it, and we're doing it. So keep calm, try to look at the positive, and try to make the homework or the things you couldn't reform now.
So the smart organizations are using this period to re-engineer themselves and, in a way, future-proof themselves.
Absolutely. And, we have in Extreme E, for example, which is my new venture, people are working as hard as normal. We have all these projects that we can now do. Let's look at all our contracts. Let's look at all our television agreements. Let's go to a review. Let's have now. Let's prepare templates for the things we want to do. Let's you can do plenty of things when you have 2 months of calm. But you can use them for, especially for startups. You always set up a startup in a hurry, and there are things that you do like that. If you suddenly, after a year and a half of the startup going, you get 2 or 3 months of stop and think and reorganize, it can be quite useful. So use it. Or we could just have stayed home and cried and wait for the storm to pass. But instead, if you really try to use the time, you can do things that are useful, and your company can be, of course we will suffer, but we will be at the same time better prepared for the future.
New ways of working and clearly new ideas. Have any of those ideas already hit the napkin?
Well, actually, yes. Actually, a huge idea hit the napkin, and we made it public already. But I'm going to tell you how the idea came through. So we were going to have 12 teams. Because of COVID and so on, less traction with sponsors, we adapted the first season and we said, okay, let's have 8 teams on the first season. So we were brainstorming, Ali, Russell, and James, I think, and myself and Carlos. And we said, okay, if we're only going to have 8 teams, why don't we have 2 drivers per team? Like this, we have more drivers. And then we said, okay, but if we do 2 drivers per team, why don't we do 2 laps? Oh, that's cool. We do 2 laps instead of 1 lap to the off-road kind of area where we race. Great. Wow. Why don't we, instead of the 2 drivers men, have 1 man and 1 woman? We do it like Wimbledon, double mixed. Great. So that idea came up completely because of the COVID situation, brainstorming, trying to do things that are more interesting and so on. And that has been a game changer for us. Since we went with this thing out, it's totally pro gender equality, but not in a fake way. It's the format that is like this. No one can say that double mix in Wimbledon is fake. It's a real tennis game, but it's just with 1 man and 1 woman. And each one has the same responsibility for winning the team, the game. Here they will have the same responsibility for winning the race. So yeah, you can get very good ideas when you are in lockdown.
Look, we're all trying to keep our sports front and center at the moment. There's a massive void, not just for our competitors or our teams trying to create these huge events, and certainly the fans are really on a bit of a famine at the moment. We had our garden clash in athletics, which was really getting 3 pole vaulters, male and female, to compete literally from their own back gardens, because they have
really
kind of, we had very good numbers watching that. There was a real appetite. I did watch on television the other day. I guess I was one of 4 million people watching your virtual race. I guess there are things that you're already, as we are, learning from these virtual and created opportunities that might just find their way into the more orthodox competitions.
Yes, this has been also, this crisis has, because it has kept everyone at home, opened the door to many different ways of doing things through technology. And one of them is this virtual race that we've done. But the interesting thing of that race, and why we think that race has had more success than other initiatives in the same field, is that because you have the same guys running in the track, running in the digital race. People want to see the real drivers. And then, if you get those guys, people follow. If you get a mix of one guy, but not all of them, like, for example, other championships, Formula 1, for example, Lewis Hamilton and these guys, they're not in the race. Some of them are, some of them are not. That detracts a lot of value from the digital race. You need to have all your real drivers on the digital alternative, and then you get 4 million watching, which is a really remarkable result. So definitely there are new ways to do things, but I have to confess, I can't wait to get back to the real thing.
In a new documentary, recently released documentary on Formula E, I think you describe yourself as a racing guy who cares about the environment. I guess you've mentioned it, Extreme E was a natural successor, given that that's where your head is.
Yes, yes, definitely was a natural successor. And yeah, that's what I am. Like I said, I'm not an environmentalist from the start. I am first I was a politician, then I was into racing, and I became really a racing guy. And I had this worry about the environment, like any kind of responsible human being should have, because we live in this planet and we are damaging it, no? But Extreme E is kind of the normal sequel of Formula E. Formula E has become already a very established championship for single seaters around the world. But we wanted to go one step farther. And one step farther is Extreme E. Extreme E is an off road championship, also electric, that follows the same objective to have electric cars all over the world. So every car in the world one day, that's our aim, it's electric. But second, and I think even more importantly, to highlight what's going on in the most damaged corners of the planet. And that is in the Arctic, that is in the Himalayas, that is in the Amazon rainforest, that is in the coastlines of Africa, that is in the deserts. You show all these processes that are going, that are happening, that are really the effect of humans in our planet. And you show that through sport. So it's a good way to put together sports and environment once again, but even on a stronger way.
I've been trawling through some of your quotes. I've got another one for you here. In an article just recently, you described COVID-19 as a test run for when we need to act on climate change. What do you think are the key lessons that we should be absorbing from this period?
Well, for me, there is one very, very important and very simple lesson at the same time. And it's going to sound very obvious, but we were not ready. We were not prepared. And if you start looking back, you see many people alerting about a pandemic. Of course, if you look back, we're not looking back at other alerts. People alert about all sort of things. But a pandemic was a risk that was there, and we were not prepared for it. If we would have been prepared, there would be a lot less death, and there would have been a lot less economic chaos and a lot less damage, and we would have been able to be a lot better off. The big lesson is there is something coming that we know it's coming, which is climate change. Let's learn the lesson and prepare, and let's learn the lesson and do now the homework so we don't get affected again by climate change, because COVID is a kid's game compared to the effects that we can get in our societies from climate change. COVID will pass. Climate change will not. When it arrives, it's irreversible. So we need to avoid the temperature by raising more than 2 degrees by the end of the century, or it will be too late. So really, that's the big lesson. We are now seeing the effect of unpreparation. We're now seeing the effect of not doing our homework with an unexpected event, but there is an expected one. So let's do the homework now.
And do you think that sport really has is going to be one of the great drivers for these social changes and this recognition, particularly around climate change? I guess also physical inactivity.
Absolutely. I think, first, I think the solution has to come from everywhere. So sport is part of our lives, but we need to make the change in every different part of our life. How we consume, how we eat, what we use, how we travel, how we behave, everything. But sport has a really important role to play. And I think sport has a role to play because it affects our habits. So like you were mentioning, living in a more healthy way, but also sport is followed by people. People is part of their passion, is part of what they watch, is part of what entertains people. So it's a really good way to get a message to people. And if people are watching, and I'm just going to give the example of Extreme E, but any sport can play a role. A race in the Arctic, and they see the Arctic completely dry, and they realize that the ice is melting, that's one more element in the brain of the public that is watching that race, that then will get them more prepared to buy more responsibly, behave more responsibly, put solar panels in the roof of their home if they can, buy an electric car if they can, etc., etc., etc. So sport can play a real role in changing the minds of people, in bringing people on the right direction, and not only people, also companies. And we in Extreme E, we are very inclusive. We are against that kind of good guy, bad guy kind of narrative. If Shell wants to contribute, they should be welcome. I mean, when a company like Shell or like Total produces 100% of the energy from solar, then we would have gotten somewhere. So those are the companies that really need to bring the change. So we have to be inclusive with everyone, not put them in a corner, but bring them on the right direction with everyone else.
Alejandro, you've been very generous with your insights about COVID-19 and some of the learnings. If I put you on the spot, what is the one thing that you have learned during this lockdown period that you think will make your business smarter going forward?
That's a very interesting question. I've learned that nothing is the end of the world. Even, if we are in trouble and we are, going through tough time and so on and so forth, nothing is the end of the world. We may be a little better, worse off, a lot worse off, some people, but we need to keep pushing, always. So that's the lesson. Nothing is the end of the world.
Alejandro, nothing is the end of the world, but it does signal the end of this interview. I'm
okay.
extraordinarily grateful for the time that you've spared us today. Thank you so much.
Pleasure always, Seb. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Extraordinary Tales in Extraordinary Times, brought to you by CSN.